welcome everybody. This is the next in a sequence of Black History Month authors interviews. And this afternoon, it is my absolute honor and pleasure to welcome to this conversation here Dr. Jahlani Niaah. I am Paul Thompson. I am one of his former students, so this is a double honor for me personally. Now today, what we're talking about is his latest book, Let Us Start with Africa, Foundations of Rastafari Scholarship. And it is edited by Dr. Niaah and Erin McLeod, who worked with him on this piece of work. Now, Dr. Niaah, before we go into the substance of things, just to give those out there in TV land a sense of who you are and the work that you have done and where you have arrived so far in the work and where you intend to go. So just for the benefit of everybody, because I know, but just for the benefit of everybody else, could you?
All right, Mr. Thompson, I for the last 15 to 20 years have been engaged with what I have described as folk philosophy, and in particular being interested in leadership within that folk philosophy. I am of the strong belief that within the discourses of the folk are instructions that are not just important for scholars but for the society in general. And a part of my interest is to find these kinds of folk and to be able to evidence this scholarship. We know that not everything which is worthy of recording is recorded. Many wise persons are not in the habit of writing. So this book represents a part of that body of work which is generated through the connection that Mortimer Planner brought through his tenure in folk philosophy in the late 90s, but also including other aspects of his work, not necessarily drawn from him, but drawn through the colleagues that related to him. So my intellectual journey in that regard has been about supporting the organic intellectual inscription with Rastafari as my key interest and key workspace. However, there are other interests related to indigenous knowledge in general, much of which holds the same kind of modality in Archer as Rastafari. Presently, I would think that my work has really just started. This is the first monograph edited by myself and Dr. Erin McLeod. We both have a connection to all the scholars. Erin is Canadian, as is one of the key subjects of one of the essays by Homiak, Carol Yawney. So it was a closure, in a sense, of a connection that originates with Mortimer Planner in collaboration with international scholars, non-Jamaican, white scholars, etc. And so this is a kind of student-disciple evidencing of that.
Okay. Well, let us start. The year is 1960. This is post the destruction of Pinnacle, which is the first sustainable Rastafari settlement. We know Pinnacle is in the news these days. But let's start in 1960. And the report on Rastafari produced by two of the subjects, if you will, in this piece, the late Professor Rex Netterford and Sir Roy Auger, who is a professor emeritus here at the university. What is the significance of the 1960 report?
The 60 report is the first attempt on the part of the University of the West Indies to respond through research on a critical matter that was presented by the society. This critical matter had to do with the nuisance of Rastafari as it was largely conceived. And based on that nuisance, the colonial response, primarily driven through police action, but being a general social disdain and disregard for the Rastafari movement. The atmosphere that we moved from the end of the 50s to the beginning of the 60s in is one where the movement is seen as completely antisocial, undesirable, escapists. And lingering in the memory of the society would have been the Claudius Henry incident, where the movement members gathered in Kingston anticipating a repatriation. It didn't happen. And then not long after that, there was the outlawing of Henry and his elements in the Red Hills area, which led to shootout, etc. There is a scandal that is immediately apparent in the pre-independence mood. And the report is really incited through Rastafari leaders like Mortimer Planner, who come to the university and engage the directorate by saying, this is a matter that we need intervention on, and we need your intellectual investment in translating what we are, who we are, what we represent to the society. In that respect, and the lecture here in the text by Sir Roy Auger confirms this, the first response that the report generated was that of a pause in the social hostility and tension. Persons were now inclined to say, let me see what these fellas have to say, as much as many were resisting what was being said. So the report, as is the issue with evidencing information, provides this intellectual concreteness that becomes available. You know, what is the history of Rastafari? What's the objectives of Rastafari? Now you could look in a book and be guided by anthropologist M.G. Smith, historian Roy Auger, and political scientist historian Nettleford, as to what this represented. So in a real sense, it was an intellectual intervention that stemmed the hostility that the movement had faced in the society and paved the way for what becomes slowly the social acceptance, if that is the correct way of, because there is still resistance even now. So social acceptance is a stretch of the imagination, but certainly the expansion of the movement outside of its strict marginal, lower class, working class perimeter into more national demographics, emphasizing middle class, brown, non-black participation. The bong which became pulled was the report, where the intellectuals ventilated and translated this in a way that suggested that there was depth for the first time that ones could see and read.
1963, the year of the Coral Gardens incident. 1966, the year of the visit of His Majesty to Jamaica. 1974, a young academic, Jahlani, steps into Jamaica, into Trenchtown, with an interest in finding out more about Rastafari. The intellectual engagement between the international community and the local Rastafari community begins somewhere in that period. What is the impact, do you think, of Carol Jahlani's work in exposing not only the tenets of Rastafari, because this was a lived experience for her, but certainly getting people to understand that there is scholarship worthy of value in the academic space? What do you think her contribution to this whole movement has been in your sense?
Well, Jahlani is among a series of scholars. She's not the first. Comitas, perhaps, before her, had made connections with similar circles. And there's also Kitzinger, who also likewise. However, and this is the point Homiak makes in his article about her, is that she is the first who brings genuine ethnographic competencies to Rastafari, living with the culture as opposed to a fleeting pass-through, or looking at a specific element but not living the live. So that's one. But beyond that, Jahlani immerses herself as a participant, practitioner, and crosses the line and writes about crossing the line and what that means to her scholarship, but the importance that it meant to the research in being able to experience the totality that the Rastafari engender and represent. Jahlani's work is therefore different from the school of anthropology that she comes out of, and in this regard she's connected to Homiak, who is her colleague, somewhat younger, but similar in his methodologies. So what it is that we have is we have an ethnographer who comes with indigenous insights and indigenous desires. I mean, she's no longer the other. She has become it herself.
She was initiated.
And she was completely initiated with crossing all the gender, racial, and social taboos that obtained at that time. What she therefore helps in doing is helping to inscribe a methodology that comes out of Rastafari, but is anthropologically rigorous as well. And so I like to think of her as the genesis of Rastafari studies, which is the veritable university that she experienced in Trenchtown, where she lived for 2 years, where she communed in her small tutorials with her study partners, as they were considered, who were chalice mates. You know, you'd come in every day, and for the duration of the reasoning, whether it started at 7 a.m. and ended at midnight, there were rounds upon rounds upon rounds of chalice smoking, and she was a part of this. And those who came in and out of that became a part of her association, but also a part of those who she documents. So she intersects the period with the Whalers, who were students of Plano as well, you know, Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and Bunny Whaler, and others who are not as famous as them. And she, perhaps in her sources, exists some of those very organic classes which are considered reasonings. And these are deposited now at the Smithsonian, which is where her collection has been transferred from Canada to. The essence is that through this unusual international link with Jahlani, the university system in Canada also became linked in an interesting way to the Plano cohort community, and there were lectures she was able to arrange that had different ones visiting from within Plano's circle. I think over time, Plano understood the potential for Yoni to archive and document him, and started to willingly provide her with the capacity to document him. And, so original notebooks, paintings, and a ton of letters are in that body of data that represents their friendship. Now, we've gone into a whole sort of conversation about significance of this text as it relates to Plano and his generation's work, as it relates to the report, as it relates to repatriation. And the yawning link is that she is the documenter of this. And that is the kind of continued example that I think institutions like the university and represented in books like this, it's how it is to have this walk with our creators, the people who are responsible for the reputation that Jamaica has gained in various different ways, and how to ensure that at their word they are properly represented and preserved.
Excellent. Now, here is 1998. Mortimer Plano is the first folk, is the second?
He's the
first. Actually, he's the first folk philosopher, resident fellow on campus. And the lecture he gives on polite violence. Now, you were perhaps a postgrad student at the time. And all of the campus is abuzz at the time to hear this Rastaman speak. This is the Rastaman who His Majesty requested escort him from the plane when he arrived.
Strung by love, as Nettleford puts it.
Exactly. Now, the significance of that polite violence lecture, coming from the time of 1962 to that point, what relevance not only Plano's scholarship